Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the next episode of The Era, where we really go deep into this premise and this hypothesis that the employee experience is really the key driver of business outcomes and ultimately business success. And this conversation that I think the pandemic helped accelerate is really dominating the conversation at an executive level of businesses of all sizes. At the boardroom, as people grapple with what does the future of work look like, what happens in different economic cycles, and it's just an exciting time to be engaged in this conversation. Thank you for joining us and continuing in this dialogue with us. We are so excited today to welcome Dr. Jim Fang, who is the founder of several businesses in the health and wellness field, most recently Phyxable, which is a physical therapy platform using connectivity, augmented reality, and some smart decisioning and tools to help change and improve physical therapy without needing to be in person, to get access to quality care and to get people right. I love the work that Dr. Jim is doing, and really across all of his work as a licensed chiropractor and strength and conditioning coach. He's worked on medical teams at world championship at Olympic level events, including MMA and wrestling. So don't mess with him. But the amazing thing in all of his work, wellness and health are really front and center. It's really, as I mentioned earlier, this is really a topic that everyone's talking about. Wellness, and with Jim, you really get wellness with a mix of digital transformation. How is technology changing care? And how is it disrupting the paradigms that's happened in health and wellness that our employees are grappling with and business models for companies? So it's a super fun intersection of technology and health and wellness that should be a great conversation. Jim, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Brad, thank you so much for having me on. What an introduction. I do not deserve half of that.
Well, it's all the road that you're traveling and that you continue to travel, and what an important conversation. And you think about the journey, your journey. You've been involved in startups in health and wellness, and it seems to be the passion of your professional life, and maybe your personal life too. But what really sparked your interest in healthcare and health and wellness?
Yeah, I think it goes back way back when I think, for me, especially in the rehab field and, feeling good and pain free, I lived with pain all my life. And I was a wrestler. I wrestled for about, I guess, 15, 16 years at varsity level, national level. And I lived through I lived through every injury. So, and back in the day, we didn't have a really good coverage for rehab and getting back to care. And I remember sitting in clinics and seeing the good therapists out there and the bad therapists out there, and what's really required to stay healthy and better. And I wish I had some of the knowledge we have now to sustain and maintain and prevent these injuries from occurring. So that's kind of what sparked my own journey in regards to pain, and I think that's one of the reasons why I got into strength and conditioning very early on, and then also into chiropractic, sports-based chiropractics, and acupuncture, and all sorts of therapies and movement patterns,
Yeah.
and just and being in practice for the last 15 years. We built integrated clinics with multiple different practitioners. So we know that model works, and we worked on high performance athletes, and they want to get better. So we know that if your intention is there and the solution is there for you, you're doing it to spec, then you should be getting better and sustaining, and hopefully we build enough trust for you to also work on the prevention and performance. But we don't see that in the employee sector, unfortunately. There's a lot more, I guess, things intertwined in their decision making and their engagement. There's a lot, to play in Medicare, as well as how the therapy and the lack of access. And I want to create a platform, really want to create a platform around, sustaining that and getting people better care, right?
And Jim, as you think about that, you mentioned a couple things that I'd love to double click in, and then get into the technology piece and some of the things that you're doing. But let's just talk about pain for a minute. You
Yeah.
mentioned that. Like, what is the research behind what percentage of the population is dealing with some level of chronic pain?
Yeah, the stats are staggering. I mean, you've seen the opioid epidemic, in the last 10 years. We also know 8 out of 10 people have some kind of low back pain at some point in their lives that affects their lives. 9 out of 10 people over the age of 65 has some kind of aches and pains, and it builds on early, right? And it's a massive cost, a cost to our public and private systems. We spend about $635 billion on this topic yearly across the states. So I think it's a big issue, and it's not one thing. It's not a medical pill. It's not just a pill. It's not just a therapy. I think it takes a really good biopsychosocial approach to not just getting people out of pain, but understanding what it is and what type of pain is good pain, and how does it come on? How does it go away? And once you have control of that, it's really empowering for that individual, right? Then you know who to see, when to see, if you need even therapy, and you know what to do when your problem, that chronic thing keeps coming or recurrent things keep coming on.
And thank you. I mean, it is one. I had a real humbling year in 2019, to where I had kind of gone through and fortunately was able to kind of get through without a lot of chronic pain, and like no back pain or knees, or I just hadn't had any issues, despite at least a moderately active lifestyle, but ended up having two bouts of just some chronic pain in 2019, and I was humbled. I literally, to get to the point where you're like, I'm willing to do pretty much anything to get rid of this. It was just and the fact that it just overcame like all my thought patterns, all my you talk about wellness. I couldn't think about anything else except for pain.
Yeah.
And for those that haven't dealt with that, it was I have much more empathy with for those that are dealing with that type of chronic pain now than I ever did, given that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see those type of people all the time. And a lot of people that you're working with might be struggling with that as well, a good 20% or so. And they're just behind the doors, closed doors, suffering, right? Struggling.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like that. It is definitely a challenge, and of course, when you're struggling with it, seek help. Make sure you're there with somebody to get there. But I think it does take a really good combined approach. And many times when you're in pain, the last thing you want to do is move, right? And our platform is really based on movement, and it's really based on the smallest things you can possibly do to get started and progressively
Yeah.
win along the way. But the last thing you want to do is move. Like old school way of thinking about this is really go to bed, chill out, do nothing. Here's some pain meds, and sleep it off. That's like probably the worst thing you can possibly do. Your body's atrophying, you're stabilizing muscles, going to crap, and you're literally just getting worse, right? And then once you do feel a little better, the inflammation dies down, then now you have this functional issue where your body patterns have changed. So we always, you have to start with some modification of movement, and that's the key thing I think to start with.
Yeah. Well, Jim, thanks for. I think that's a great, I think, bridge to say, okay, no matter where you are, and yeah, as an individual, and from how you're doing with wellness, let's start from where you are. But the same thing, you think about these business leaders listening to the podcast and saying, hey, what do I do from where I am here in wellness and offering wellness to my employees and getting into that employee experience? And I think about what's happening. The pandemic kind of changed some of people's perspectives on relative to online healthcare services,
Right.
because you couldn't get to the doctor or you couldn't see the doctor. And so whether it's telehealth or online health or different platforms, it seems like that transformation in healthcare, it's accelerated everything. So the question, but you were ahead of this in terms of being really technology forward in your recent startups, whether that's Fixable or Startup Health or other businesses that you've been engaged with. Like, why? What was it that you said there might be a different or better way to do this?
Yeah, I think one of the key stats for us was we know that 7 out of 10 people, like 70% of patients that actually start even a rehab program, they drop off their treatment plans before they're actually discharged. So before you're fully better, you're dropping off either because of time or money, right? So you got to get back to work, you got to get going, and you feel a little bit better, and then you start doing your regular stuff, and then a couple months later, reoccurrence rate, right? So we really wanted to create a platform where we're able to really engage that individual, utilizing the same psychology tools. Facebook and Instagram makes you infinity scroll to death. We want to use the same tools to kind of work towards better health, right? And prevent. I really came to this game for prevention, but prevention is really hard because you can probably think back to your situation, where you're in chronic pain. Once you're out of that pain, are you thinking back to that problem? The last thing you want to think about is that problem, right? But especially if somebody never told you, hey, if you do this, X, Y, and Z, and this hits you a couple times over the head, if you do X, Y, and Z, you can prevent this from happening within, significantly lower your chances of happening again. So we really want to create better engagement within people for better health and movement, and then so they can do the things they love and they're not inhibited, right? So I think digital health there's been a massive boom over the pandemic for obvious reasons. We really launched back in 2017 before the pandemic, and we really hit certain populations like rural populations, certain individuals who are not ambulatory, who are not mobile, can't get to a clinical practice. So we started there, and then we started driving real traction there because people are, it takes like 2.5 hours per session, 9 sessions on average, 9 sessions leading to 7% drop off, right? So it's definitely a problem. So, a lot of time wasted, a lot of employer dollars spent, days away from work. So, we really want to help with that, I think, with that thought process when patients are coming in. And then number two, ease of access. For a lot of the guys I see, like they really wait until the last minute when something's really bad, right? Until they come in. So it's really important to catch it early. And with good, like now we do like functional movement screens. So we actually watch you move, right? So we can pick out certain things that you're doing or not doing correctly. So if you go into a squat, for instance, your knees are kind of caving in. We know those glute knees on the side of the hips are not working properly. So if you're not aligning your knee properly, you're doing this as you squat, you're moving undulated in and out, and as you squat, then you're more likely to have more degenerative changes inside that knee, right? So those are the things that we can catch really early on. And the beautiful part about some of the employers that we're working with, we're implementing those programs now, and it's fun for people. So it gets people moving, number one, and we can implement it so it's quick little breaks throughout the day, and you're feeling good and get these reminders to move. So your enkephalons are building, your endorphins are feeling good. You're not, after lunch, you're not getting that itis and just falling asleep. It's kind of built into your day. So throughout the day, not only are you working on these things, but you're also feeling good, right? So I think they're really good employees, and then of course employers who have a MSK, musculoskeletal issue in their workforce, and mental health issue in their workforce are the first takers here, and driving those programs with better engagement along the way is really important. And it really needs I think a strong hold on, like when you start the program, there needs to be a lot of engagement. So we start with a wellness talk on the topic of your choice. So for some of the tech companies we're actually doing more of like, recently we've been doing the morning routine. Like, what is your morning routine? How do we amplify, how we do this? And then after those sessions, individually, they get one-on-one sessions or one-on-many sessions to kind of correct your morning routines. Things like ergonomics and how do you set up your desk properly, posture. And we can do it at a fraction of the price because it's all digital. I don't have to travel, right? And we can do one-on-many. And then now we can implement programming and send it directly to their phone, and then it pings them the right time to do the right thing. So I think because we're able to scale that way, it can really lower the cost, and then also prevent, we have really good ROIs on, surgeries prevented, as well as just NPS scores, and also just medication that they actually need to take.
And so this technology revolution in health and wellness, I mean, do you feel like we're making progress? Is it a positive thing as it relates to what's being delivered to employees?
Yeah, no, that's great. And the answer is yes. And health, I guess, the Web 2.0, for the last, 10 years or so, when it comes to healthcare, there's a lot of red tape, right? So there's tons of red tape around it, and it takes a long time for the healthcare system to move. politically or within the system, because, liabilities and what have you. So when it comes to technology, healthcare is one of the industries that come last. And I think the trigger really was the pandemic and really triggered our society to say, hey, what are some better ways we can deliver healthcare and also potentially work on creating better humans? And how do we even lower the cost to, and barriers to entry so we can catch things a lot earlier? So there's so much more funding going into healthcare right now in digital tech. Some are, I know as we speak today, the NASDAQ's not in a great place, but but a lot of the companies that really needed the funding to really bridge the gap and get their technology through FDA, and they're really getting it done. There's really some really cool companies coming out with some really cool stuff that's going to on the preventative care side of things, and I'm super excited. And one of my topic points and one of the things I go down really deep is longevity. And this is part of, I think, the bigger picture for me for longevity, the physical health. But there's so many things coming out. I'm really excited for what how long I can live to, and my goal is to live to like 110 and just die in my sleep. So I want to feel good until then. So really excited about what's happening.
So that's your life plan is 110. Okay, we'll
quote me on
capture
this.
that here. I guess so. It sounds like we're making progress. There's some things there. How from Fhyxable, from an employer standpoint, from an employee, yourself, like. How is your work in chiropractic and acupuncture, in strength and conditioning, in coaching, how has that influenced your philosophy on employee wellness?
No, great question. I think I come from many realms of therapy. So what really intrigued me growing up and having my injuries is really to figure out what really works, right? Because you go to, chiropractor A, physiotherapy B, you go to occupational therapy, you got a osteopath. They all kind of have different philosophies and what works and what doesn't work. But I think ultimately, for me, it's the evidence led. Like, show me research. Show me that this actually works in not just N of one, but N of tens of thousands of million people. And then now formulate it, and then, show me the results, and then give it to more people, right? And then from those people, can we now take that data and start tweaking and create even better formulations, right? Either through movement, exercise, self-mobilization, stabilization, ice, heat, intermittent fasting, right? For inflammatory control, right? So how can we add those little tidbits together where all these little tiny tools where now it becomes a larger output for that human to feel good and stay good, right? So that's what really interests me. And we're always doing research, and all of our programming on there are, evidence-led with hundreds of pieces of research behind it. We can customize it, programming as well if we need to, right, for those individuals. And in the future, the system will just customize on its own using artificial intelligence. So I think when it comes down to technology, implementing, I think it takes iterations over time, and I think it can do as good job and assist the practitioner along the way and take away some of the mundane things that we don't want to do as well, right? So checking for updates on pain levels, so like remote monitoring those individuals, like paying those individuals, make sure they're doing their exercise and movements. How are they progressing? Do they know they're progressing, right? And what is the next step? And how do you tie it to maybe even vanity and what they want versus what they need, right? So tied to some of that vanity to actually engage them, to make sure they're fully engaged, to not just get out of pain but work on prevention and human performance.
So it's interesting as you think about like the philosophies there. And let me ask you a question. One of the things that a lot of people think about is there's this in wellness, there's this people feel like, oh, I always have to be in balance with my work and my life. And it feels like we're maybe adding little weights here to try to maintain that balance.
Yeah.
How do you think just generally about work-life balance?
It does differ. And I think, again, I'm N1, so I think a little bit differently. I'm an immigrant Asian man. I came here when I was 8 years old. My dad first came, a year before us and lived in a subway station with $200 in his pocket, started washing dishes in Chinatown, right? So I came here, I lived in a room not bigger than this basement room here with both of my parents, and I slept on 2 chairs for the first couple of years of my life. So I've lived through crap. And, growing up in wrestling, I think I just maybe attracted to pain. And you've been in startups, that's very painful as well in the beginning. I really relish in challenges. So I'm really, put a challenge in front of me, I will solve for it, right? And I will keep pushing hard and find new ways to look for a solution to win, right? So I'm a little bit different. And then I work with a lot of people where they maybe didn't have that push, or maybe they had maybe a lot easier growing up and didn't have some of those resiliency and tools, right, to support them, and either mentally or physically. So there's definitely a spectrum of people, but what I think really works for people is that mental health is a huge problem right now. We know that it's a growing problem due to the pandemic and social interaction. But in order to build that ceiling of resilience, one of the easiest way I would say is to start moving, right? It could be simple. It doesn't have to be an exercise. Don't call it exercise, that word, but it could be small as even 5 minutes of movement. Super easy. Going for a walk, right? Go next meeting, jump on a phone with your client or with your coworker and do that. And it gets easier and easier and easier. And the good thing about exercise and movement is that it drives endorphins and kethalons. So those natural morphine, those natural hormones that create energy, right? And it's all about energy and level of energy. So if you're able to create that level of energy, and now you're able to raise the bar and your ceiling, now you have a greater level, of resilience, and you have a lot more ability to be more resilient and be able to, attend to some of the issues that maybe you don't have control of. You have control of the physical self, right? And even people in chronic pain, with some motivation, with some, first steps to be able to do. Once you get that little inkling, that little win, get that little hit of that dopamine, the next step is X, right? Next step is Y. Next step is, maybe running your first 500 meters. That's a whole nother story.
And it's interesting as you think about I listened to your impassioned plea to just get each one of us as individuals to get moving. And then I hear the impassioned plea for, if you want to prevent sickness, you want to prevent people being out of the office for different things, if you want to have a great employee experience, let's get your people moving. And how do you start to prevent, and some of the things that you can do there? I think as you step back, Jim, how do you define a great employee experience? What is that ideal for you?
Yeah. If I feel like crap at work, I'm not going to be able to perform, period, at the end of the day. You can't output, and it's really going to be difficult for you to, add value, at work. So, as an employee, in the past, as well as my employees, I just want to make sure they are having a great experience. So we're there to support them, and either through, benefits, or either through service, or, creating an environment that really enhances their overall, biopsychosocial wellness is, I think, a really good place. So we're putting our foot forward, and we're paying it forward. So creating those better humans at the end of the day is going to really output, significantly. But at the end of the day, there still needs to be performance. Should be performance led, and whatever those metrics are, and those, those North Stars for you guys. I think that's really important to, dictate. There's time for work, and along work, let me give you some tools, and let me give you some solutions to feel good along the way, right? And, as part of your performance reviews, even, I think you don't have to dive deep into, health history or anything like that, which you can't really take, but I think understanding where they are feeling, how they're feeling, and what support can I give you is really important, right? And then what are the tools I can provide those individuals to even look at to help them perform at a better state of health, right?
One of the things that I get asked a lot about by executives and HR leaders is, okay, I've tried to be really thoughtful about how to create mental wellness, physical wellness programs, even pain management for their employees, but the uptake of that might not be what they hoped for. What would you say to people as they're struggling maybe with the implementation of this?
Yeah, that's a question we get all the time. There's tons of different random tools out there to engage with your employees, but I think ultimately you need to understand what the main problem is that you're trying to solve for. So if you're a healthcare company that have PSWs in the workplace and they're just getting backaches all the time, we're probably a solution. If you're maybe a tech company where you don't really have any medical spend issues, but maybe you have some mental health issues, then maybe Inkblot or something might be a better solution for you. So I think taking a design approach to understanding the end user, to understanding the individuals that you're working with day in and day out, like deep down understanding as to their why and what, I think that's really important. Then you're going to figure out the how. So for us, when we jump in with a company, we need to understand them. So we go into a company and we start really going to a journey mapping with the HR folks and understanding, like taking a design approach to it and understanding what the main problem point are, what they coming to you for, and what is the recurrent problem that keeps happening. Maybe it's not the solution they're asking for, but it's the problem that keeps happening, the end result, right? And then we go backwards from there to figure out, okay, what are the things that's actually causing these issues? It could be ergonomics. It could be just getting burnt out, length of hours. People are not working because you're working through their lunchtime and they don't have the time to actually work in a move, right? And if it's like, safety, we've been working with a lot of healthcare workers recently because they're getting burnt out. And so when you're burnt out, mentally not there, then you're physically not there. And then when you're transporting patients, you're not working on your form. So we understand what that solution issue is. And then now we're going to implement something very specific to you. I think driving that engagement from externally is really important because internally, programs for X, Y, and Z, you're after your employees, or your relationship with the employees is a little bit different. So having external people coming in to drive that conversation, I think it's going to be you're going to get a lot more engagement. And we start those conversations, getting those people on the same call, or we're going in person by really asking the employees, what do you want? So not what they just need, but what are some things you want when it comes down to movement and feeling good or aging? So a lot of times, some of the tech companies we've been working with is, morning routine. What do I do? How do I even get a workout and movement in before my work hours, right? And how do I do I need to, like, is it just one bang and that's it? Or is it like throughout the day? What about after hours? What is the best time to gain muscle? Like, those are the questions they want to know about. And intermittent fasting, that's been a hot topic as well, right? Weight loss, those are the things that, yes, it's vanity, but it's still their physical health and how they feel, right? So we address those problems and then we drive, like, prevention is big for us. So we drive prevention. Here's the things you need to do at work and at home, and to feel, not just feel good for you and your family and, day to day, but also to better perform at work and feel good at work. So you go home and your energy level is still significantly high.
And as you think about the future, because you're kind of at this intersection of wellness and technology, and how do we help these things amplify both to move us forward, where do you think we're going to be 5-10 years from now? What are we going to be talking about? What's going to be implemented with employees with companies?
Yeah, no, great question again. I think talking to a lot of my colleagues at Startup Health and a lot of the health tech leaders in the world, and I think data is going to be a big thing. Data has been a massive thing in the last 15 years when it comes down to every other industry. So when you want to know about your health and where you're at in real time, I think that's already coming. So you have blood glucose monitors, that's already there. You have physical checks.
So kind of wearables, maybe more of a trend.
Yeah, wearables is a massive trend. You have your Apple Watch that can detect afibrillation. Many of those early detection tools we call them screening tools. There's a lot more coming out for hormonal stuff. We have a few companies that we're working with that are doing that for amenorrhea to many hormonal issues that females deal with. So there's many tools that can give you data really quickly, really early, so you can implement things in lifestyles. And also, early intervention and medication that can really prevent bigger disease, right? And I think cancers of the past. I think also with stem cell research now, and even with stroke, and also regeneration of joints, and there's a lot coming in regards to regenerative medicine. I think we're gonna have a stronghold in regards to data. I think it's a time now, especially if you're in your 40s and you start to age, in your 50s. I think it's a really good time to kind of take hold and understand your physical and human self. Like, you need to understand yourself. You know so much about podcasting or HR. You should take a good 20% and understand your body and how it works and what you need to do on a daily basis, because prevention is really the key, right? The Medicaid system, Medicare system right now is really disease care. It's just getting in to plug the problem. But the actual issue is a lot. It's a lot bigger, and it's what you do day to day. It's also aging, right? Aging is the biggest precursor to disease. So I think data is going to help you get there and take earlier intervention.
And and as you think about that, like, okay, I'm an employee. How much data do I want my employer to have about my health? Like, is that like where I know there's HIPAA regulations. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you think about the data and the access to data? Between the employee and employer kind of relationship?
Data relies with the patient. So at the end of the day, the patient should own their data, and we should be in control of our data. I should know what my MRI says, 10 years ago, and where does it compare? And then next time I go, say I'm in Toronto now, if I go to California, it's the same system that can pull up your data to support you and help you to understand exactly what you have. And with artificial intelligence, you can mix match from a medication standpoint, pharmaceuticals, what they've done, past injuries, past surgical. They should be able to pin it all together. And medical doctor, here's the things you shouldn't do, and you should probably do, and things to avoid, right? I think at the end of the day, data is owned by the patient. I think that's really hard because, back in 2010, we created the first, I was a co-founder at one of the first cloud-based electronic medical records, right? Yeah. And it's all about interoperability, right? You got to have interoperability from one system to the next so people can switch and what have you. But big pharma, they buy that data from these EMR companies, and that's how they really make money. So, and the last thing you want to be is interoperable. So I think if there's any tech founders out there listening right now, if you're able to really hone in on a health record that's owned by the patient, by the end user, by that person, and it's secure, I think that's the main key thing. I think employers should understand cohort data. You should never have specific data for that patient, nor do you want that liability. But cohort, understanding what is going on within your population, what is going on, what is the most occurrences, what is my biggest cost in my benefits, right? Like, what am I paying for? What are the upstream things I can invest in now so I can reap the rewards later as well? I think that's what they really want to know, right? And then at the end of the day, are your KPIs, like, are you meeting your goals? Are you performing at the end of the day as an employee, right? So I think once you have that the two down, I think that's really important. But in most states and provinces, you can't see that private information, and a lot of private impact assessments go through that as well. So
I think Jim, I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, so I'm just curious. You've got a wrestling background. You've coached at a high level with wrestling and MMA. So do you ever jump in the octagon with your athletes and still give it a go, or have you retired from that type of environment?
It's been a choppy podcast, so maybe we have to get down. But no, yeah, it's been I guess, the sport of wrestling, I think, and MMA in general has been had a huge impact with me. I grew up in an area that wasn't very good. So, if it wasn't my coach, my high school coach, I guess, back in the day, who knows what I would be doing, spending my energy on. But I still get out and I work out every single day just about, and I coach a local wrestling team as well. They're just getting back on the mat now with COVID and everything else. But it's a great entry. It's a great sport, and things like wrestling as well as jiu-jitsu, I think, really help people focus. It's an area where you can spend a lot of energy, a lot of focus, and control, understand your body as well.
Well, look, Jim, let's wrap here. I just want to thank Dr. Jim Fang for joining us. What an incredible background. just deep understanding of what's going into this kind of this prevention wellness challenge that we're having not only as humans but also with companies in terms of how do we best reach out and engage, because you really think about it, focusing on the humans and delivering employee experience that work for the business is good for business. That is the fundamental kind of premise that we're talking about. And just amazing discussion today. Jim, thank you for joining us and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Brad. It's great being here.